In a quiet neighborhood where dusty roads met rows of small houses, Amina woke up before the sun every morning. The sky was still dark when she tied her scarf, stepped into the kitchen, and began her daily routine. The house was small, but it was clean. Every corner carried the mark of her care. The floors shined, the curtains were always fresh, and the air smelled of warm bread and tea. Amina was known in the neighborhood as a kind woman. She spoke gently, smiled often, and never complained even when life became hard. People admired her patience. They said she had the heart of someone who believed that love could fix anything. But behind her soft smile lived a woman who carried heavy burdens in silence. Her husband, Hassan, sat at the small wooden table, staring into his cup of tea. He used to greet her mornings with warmth and laughter. Years ago he would hold her hand, joke with her, and thank her for every little thing she did. Back then their love had been strong and full of dreams. They had married young, full of hope and excitement. Hassan had promised Amina a life of comfort, while Amina had promised to stand beside him no matter what. In those early days they believed love alone was enough. But life had slowly tested that promise. Money became tight. Hassan struggled to keep steady work. Some months he earned just enough to buy food. Other months they had to borrow from neighbors to survive. Still, Amina never blamed him. Instead, she worked harder. When Hassan lost his first job, Amina quietly sold her gold bracelet, the one her mother had given her on her wedding day. She never told him how much it hurt to let it go. She only told him it was a small sacrifice for their future. Later, when bills piled up again, she started sewing clothes for neighbors late into the night. Her fingers would ache and her eyes would burn from tiredness, but she never stopped. She believed in Hassan. She believed in their marriage. And more than anything, she believed that hard times would pass. But Hassan had started changing. At first, the changes were small. He became quiet during meals. His laughter disappeared. His eyes no longer held the same warmth when he looked at Amina. Sometimes he would stare outside the window for long periods, watching expensive cars pass by their street. Amina noticed it, but she chose patience instead of questions. One evening, while walking home from the market, Hassan saw a large black car stop near a grand house at the end of the road. A well-dressed man stepped out, laughing loudly as servants rushed to open the gate for him. Hassan slowed his steps. He watched the man's polished shoes, expensive watch, and confident smile. Something inside Hassan twisted that day. It was not admiration. It was envy. That night, Hassan returned home later than usual. Amina greeted him with her usual gentle smile and served him dinner. He barely touched his food. Instead, he spoke in a low voice filled with frustration. Life, he said, was unfair. Some people lived in luxury without struggle, while others worked day and night and still stayed poor. Amina listened quietly. She understood his pain, but she also believed in gratitude. She tried to comfort him with hopeful words, reminding him that patience and effort would one day bring rewards. But Hassan no longer wanted patience. He wanted success. He wanted wealth. And slowly, pride began to grow inside him like a silent storm. As days passed, Hassan became more restless. He complained about their small house, their simple meals, and their worn furniture. Things that once felt enough now felt like signs of failure to him. Amina noticed the growing distance, but she stayed loyal. Even when tired, she cooked his favorite meals. Even when her back hurt from long hours of sewing, she welcomed him with kindness. She kept believing that love could still bring him back. Deep inside, she held on to memories of the man he once was. But Hassan's thoughts were changing in ways she did not yet understand. One afternoon, Hassan returned home with a strange look in his eyes. Not anger. Not sadness. Something else. Excitement. He placed his worn bag on the table and sat down slowly, as if holding back something important. Amina noticed the shift immediately. For the first time in months, his face showed energy. He told her about a new opportunity at work. A large company had noticed his skills. They wanted him to assist in a business project. It was different from anything he had done before. The project involved wealthy clients, luxury offices, and powerful people. Amina felt proud as she listened. She believed this was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Her heart filled with hope. Maybe this was the moment their struggles would finally end. But Hassan felt something deeper than hope. As he described the tall buildings, shining floors, and rich businessmen he would soon meet, his voice carried a tone Amina had never heard before. It was admiration mixed with hunger. Not hunger for food. Hunger for wealth. That night, while Amina slept peacefully beside him, Hassan stayed awake, staring into the darkness. His mind filled with images of expensive cars, elegant offices, and wealthy lifestyles. For the first time in years, he felt close to the world he had always envied. And deep inside his heart, something dangerous began to grow. Not gratitude, not humility, but desire. Desire for a life far bigger than the one he had built with Amina. Amina, unaware of the storm forming inside her husband, slept with quiet hope in her heart. She believed this opportunity would bring them closer. She believed it would save their marriage. But she did not yet realize that this opportunity would soon open the door to temptation and change their lives forever. And that was the moment when the first turning point quietly began. The new job changed Hassan's routine almost overnight. Before, his mornings were slow and predictable. He would sit at the same wooden table, drink tea, and leave for work wearing the same worn shoes he had used for years. But now, everything felt different. On his first day at the new company, Hassan stood outside the tall glass building, staring up at it with wide eyes. The building seemed to touch the clouds. Its shiny windows reflected the bright sun, making it look powerful and untouchable. For a moment he hesitated. His heart beat faster than usual. This place was nothing like the small workshops he had worked in before. Inside these walls, he knew wealthy people made decisions that changed lives. And now, somehow, he was part of it. As he stepped inside, cool air brushed against his face. The floors shined like mirrors. People walked confidently, dressed in clean suits and polished shoes. Hassan suddenly became aware of his own clothes, simple, old, and slightly faded. A quiet discomfort settled inside him. But along with that discomfort came determination. He told himself that this was his chance to rise. His chance to become someone important. At first, the work was difficult. Everything moved fast. People spoke with confidence, using words and ideas that felt unfamiliar to him. Still, Hassan pushed himself harder than ever before. He stayed late, watched carefully, and learned quickly. And soon, his efforts caught the attention of someone unexpected. Her name was Nadia. Hassan first saw her during an important meeting. The room fell silent when she entered. She carried herself with calm confidence. Her clothes were elegant but simple, her posture straight, her voice steady. There was something about her presence that made people listen carefully when she spoke. Nadia was not just wealthy. She was powerful. Hassan noticed how others respected her opinions. When she gave instructions, people obeyed without hesitation. It was a level of authority he had never seen before. At first, Hassan only watched from a distance. But one afternoon, fate brought them face to face. Hassan had stayed late to finish a report. Most workers had already gone home. The office had grown quiet. As he gathered his papers, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around. Nadia stood there. She glanced at the documents in his hands and asked about his work. Her tone was calm but curious. Hassan felt nervous speaking to her, but he answered honestly. He explained the problem he was trying to solve and the effort he had put into it. Nadia listened carefully. Then she nodded slightly. She told him she admired dedication. Those simple words felt heavier than gold. No one had spoken to him like that in years. From that moment, something inside Hassan shifted. Days passed, and their interactions became more frequent. Nadia began asking for his help on small tasks. She praised his attention to detail and his strong work ethic. Hassan felt proud every time she noticed him. He began staying later at work, hoping to impress her. Meanwhile, life at home remained the same. Amina continued her routine, sewing late into the night, cooking simple meals, and waiting patiently for Hassan to return. But now Hassan often came home later than before. At first he explained it as extra work. Amina believed him without question. She trusted him completely. Still, something felt different. When he sat at the dinner table, his attention drifted far away. His answers became shorter. His laughter became rare. Amina noticed the change but blamed it on stress. She told herself he was working hard for their future. She never imagined another reason. At work, Hassan's world continued expanding. One evening, Nadia invited several team members to dinner at an expensive restaurant to celebrate a successful project. Hassan had never stepped into a place like that before. The lights were soft, the tables covered with clean white cloth, and the food arrived in dishes more beautiful than anything he had seen. He felt both nervous and amazed. As he watched Nadia speak confidently with others, he noticed how easily she moved in this world. Luxury surrounded her like it was natural. That night, as he sat in the restaurant, Hassan felt something awaken inside him. It was more than admiration. It was longing. He imagined a life where he no longer worried about rent, bills, or broken furniture. A life where respect came easily. And slowly, without realizing it, he began comparing the two worlds in his life. At home there was Amina, kind, patient, always waiting. At work there was Nadia, strong, confident, admired. The comparisons grew dangerous. When he returned home late that night, Amina greeted him with a warm smile, just like always. She had stayed awake, waiting to serve him dinner. But Hassan barely noticed her effort. His mind was still filled with images of shining glass, rich food, and confident voices. Days turned into weeks. Small lies began slipping into his conversations. He told Amina he had meetings when he was simply staying late to remain close to Nadia's world. He stopped sharing details about his day. And Amina, though she trusted him deeply, began to feel a quiet unease growing inside her chest. It was not suspicion. It was distance. She sensed that her husband was drifting somewhere she could not reach. Meanwhile, Hassan changed in subtle ways. He began caring more about his appearance. He spoke differently, walked differently, even held himself differently. Confidence filled him, but it was not the humble confidence of growth. It was pride. The more time he spent around wealth, the more he desired it. And the more he desired it, the less satisfied he became with his simple life. One afternoon, while reviewing reports, Nadia praised Hassan again for his dedication. Her words carried respect and approval. That moment lingered in his mind long after the conversation ended. For the first time in years he felt seen, valued, important. And that feeling became addictive. At home, Amina prepared his favorite meal that evening, hoping to brighten his mood. But when Hassan arrived, he seemed distracted. His thoughts were far away, somewhere between the life he had built and the life he now wanted. That night, as he lay awake beside Amina, he stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Amina slept peacefully, trusting him as always. But Hassan's heart had begun moving in another direction. He was standing at a dangerous crossroad, between loyalty and ambition, between love and desire. And deep inside his heart, without speaking a word, Hassan made a silent choice. Not with his voice, but with his thoughts. He chose ambition. He chose the world of wealth and power. And in that quiet moment of decision, he unknowingly took the first step toward betrayal. The line between loyalty and temptation had been crossed. The distance between Hassan and Amina did not happen in one day. It grew slowly, like a crack spreading across glass. At first, it was only small changes, little things that Amina tried to ignore. But as days turned into weeks, those small changes became impossible to miss. Hassan began coming home later than usual. Sometimes the food on the table grew cold while Amina waited. She would sit quietly, listening for the sound of his footsteps outside the door. When he finally arrived, his face carried a tired expression, but his eyes were somewhere else, far away. "Work is getting harder," he would explain in a calm voice. Amina nodded each time, choosing trust over doubt. But deep inside, a strange heaviness began to grow in her chest. At work, Hassan's connection with Nadia grew stronger. What had started as professional respect slowly turned into personal closeness. They spent long hours together reviewing reports, planning projects, and discussing ideas. But the conversations were no longer only about work. Nadia began sharing stories about her life, about her success, her travels, and the struggles she had overcome to become wealthy. Hassan listened with fascination. Her world felt exciting, powerful, and full of possibilities. One evening, after another long day, Nadia invited Hassan to stay behind and help her review an urgent project. The office had grown quiet. Most workers had already left. Outside, the city lights glowed brightly through the tall windows. Inside, silence filled the room. As they worked side by side, Nadia spoke about ambition. She said that success required courage, the courage to leave behind anything that slowed progress. Her words stayed in Hassan's mind long after he returned home that night. He began thinking about his own life, about his small house, about the endless financial struggles. And slowly, dangerously, he began seeing Amina, not as his partner, but as part of the life he wanted to escape. At home, Amina noticed new signs of distance. Hassan stopped sharing his thoughts. He avoided eye contact. Even during meals, his attention stayed locked on his phone. Late at night, when he believed she was asleep, his phone screen glowed in the darkness. Messages arrived quietly. Short messages. Hidden conversations. Amina noticed the soft glow of light many times. But she never asked questions. Not because she did not care. Because she was afraid of the answer. Still, the truth began revealing itself piece by piece. One afternoon, Amina visited Hassan's workplace to deliver lunch. It was something she had done many times before when they struggled financially. She walked into the building carrying a small container of warm food. But as she entered the office, something unexpected happened. She saw Hassan standing near the glass windows, laughing. Not the tired, forced laughter she had seen at home. Real laughter. Free laughter. And standing beside him was Nadia. Elegant. Confident. Beautiful. The two stood close together, speaking comfortably like people who shared more than work. Amina froze in place. Her fingers tightened around the container she carried. For a moment time felt frozen. Hassan noticed her presence only seconds later. His smile faded instantly. A strange tension filled the air. He walked toward her quickly, his expression uneasy. Amina forced a small smile and handed him the lunch container. She said nothing about what she had seen. But inside her heart something cracked. That evening Hassan returned home unusually quiet. Amina watched him carefully while serving dinner. Her hands trembled slightly but her voice remained calm. She wanted to ask questions. So many questions. But fear held her back. Fear of hearing the truth. Days passed. The late nights continued. The hidden phone calls increased. And Hassan's attitude toward Amina grew colder. He began criticizing small things. The food, the house, the way she managed expenses. Words that once carried kindness now carried irritation. One night, after returning home very late, Hassan found Amina sitting alone in the living room. The lights were dim. She had been waiting for hours. Her eyes looked tired, but her voice stayed gentle. She finally asked him why he had changed. Why he no longer spoke to her the way he once did. Why distance had replaced warmth. For a moment Hassan remained silent. Then something inside him snapped. Instead of comfort, harsh words spilled from his mouth. He spoke about dreams he never achieved. About frustration he had carried for years. About feeling trapped in a life filled with struggle. Amina listened quietly, her heart breaking with every word. She realized then that the man standing before her was not the same man she had married years ago. Something had changed inside him. Something dangerous. And finally, the truth arrived. Hassan confessed that he wanted a different life. A better life. A life filled with comfort, respect, and wealth. He spoke about opportunity. About success. And then, with a cold tone that cut deeper than any knife, he told her he was leaving. Leaving the house. Leaving the marriage. Leaving her. The words echoed inside the room like thunder. Amina felt her world collapse in seconds. Her legs trembled, but she remained standing. Her voice came out soft and broken as she asked him why. Why after everything she had sacrificed? Why after years of loyalty and love? But Hassan had already made his decision. He spoke about chasing success. About needing freedom to grow. He convinced himself that leaving her was necessary for his future. That his dreams mattered more than his promises. That night Hassan packed his belongings. Each item he placed into his bag felt like another piece of their life being destroyed. Amina stood near the doorway, unable to move. Her chest felt heavy. Her eyes burned with tears she struggled to hold back. Outside, neighbors noticed the unusual activity. Whispers began spreading quickly. Rumors followed soon after. By morning the entire neighborhood knew. Hassan had left his wife. And worse, he had left her for another woman. Nadia. The shame fell on Amina like a heavy storm. People stared. Some pitied her. Others judged her silently. Questions filled the air. What did she do wrong? Why did her husband leave? Why wasn't she enough? The cruelest part was not the whispers. It was the silence inside her empty home. That evening, Amina sat alone at the same wooden table where they once shared laughter. Now, the chair across from her remained empty. Cold. And far away, in another part of the city, Hassan stepped into a new life beside Nadia. A life filled with luxury. A life filled with comfort. A life he believed would bring happiness. But as he closed the door behind him that night, he unknowingly closed the door on the woman who had loved him through every struggle. And in that moment, the betrayal became complete. Hassan had officially abandoned Amina, choosing wealth over loyalty and comfort over love. The silence inside the house became Amina's new companion. After Hassan left, the rooms that once held laughter now felt heavy and empty. Every corner reminded her of memories she could not escape. The wooden chair where Hassan used to sit remained untouched. His cup stayed on the shelf for days as if he might return at any moment. But he never did. The first few days passed in a blur. Amina moved slowly through the house, completing small tasks without thinking. She cooked meals she could not eat. She cleaned rooms that did not need cleaning. Her body moved, but her heart felt frozen. At night, sleep refused to come. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Hassan's final words over and over again. Each memory felt like a sharp stone pressing against her chest. Sometimes tears came silently. Other times they came in waves that left her weak and shaking. Still, morning always arrived. And with it came reality. Bills began to pile up. Without Hassan's income, money became a constant worry. The small savings they once had disappeared quickly, spent on food and basic needs. Amina returned to sewing clothes for neighbors, just like she had done years ago. But now the work felt heavier. Her fingers moved slower, and her eyes burned from exhaustion. Every stitch felt like a reminder of her new life. A life she had never imagined living alone. Outside, whispers followed her everywhere. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some greeted her with pity. Others avoided her completely as if her pain was something contagious. A few women spoke softly when she passed, their voices filled with quiet judgment. People talked about Hassan leaving her. People talked about Nadia. People talked about failure. Those words reached Amina's ears, even when she tried to ignore them. But the deepest pain did not come from gossip. It came from loneliness. Friends who once visited often began to disappear. Invitations stopped coming. Phone calls became rare. Even some relatives kept their distance, unsure how to help or unwilling to become involved. Amina felt herself shrinking inside. The world that once felt warm now felt cold and distant. Weeks passed. Then came the day she feared the most. The landlord knocked on her door early one morning. His face carried seriousness, not cruelty, but not kindness either. He spoke calmly, explaining that rent had not been paid for months. He said he had waited patiently, but he could not wait forever. Amina listened quietly. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the edge of the door. She tried to explain her situation, but the words felt weak against reality. Within days she was forced to leave the house she once called home. The house where she had built her life with Hassan. The house where dreams were once shared. Now it belonged to the past. Packing her belongings felt like losing pieces of her soul. Every item carried memories. Every memory carried pain. With nowhere else to go, Amina moved into a small room at the edge of town. The room was tiny, with cracked walls and a single window that barely let in sunlight. But it was shelter. And for now that was enough. The nights in that room felt endless. Silence pressed against her ears like a heavy weight. There were moments when fear crept into her heart. Fear of the future, fear of loneliness, fear that her life would never recover. Some nights, she cried until her body had no strength left. Other nights, she sat quietly, staring at nothing, lost inside her thoughts. Questions filled her mind. Why had Hassan changed? Why had love not been enough? Why had loyalty been rewarded with betrayal? But even in her deepest pain, one thing remained inside her heart. She refused to hate. Bitterness tried to enter her heart many times, but she pushed it away. She remembered the woman she had always been, kind, patient, faithful. She refused to let pain destroy that part of herself. One afternoon, while sitting near the small window of her room, Amina noticed something simple. Children playing outside. They laughed loudly, chasing each other across the dusty road. Their joy felt pure and untouched by hardship. For the first time in weeks, Amina felt something different inside her chest. Not sadness. Not anger. But realization. Life had not stopped. The world continued moving even after her pain. That moment became the beginning of a quiet turning point. Later that day she picked up her sewing needle again. But this time her movements felt steadier. Stronger. She began taking more sewing orders even when her hands ached. She worked longer hours, determined to survive without depending on anyone. Soon she discovered that people still valued her skills. Neighbors brought clothes for repair. Some women asked her to design simple dresses. The work was small, but it brought income. More importantly, it brought dignity. Each completed dress became proof that she was still capable, still strong, still alive. Slowly, Amina began rebuilding herself, not just financially but emotionally. She started waking up earlier again. She cleaned her small room until it felt warm and welcoming. She cooked simple meals and forced herself to eat, even when hunger felt distant. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Pain did not disappear completely. Memories still visited her during quiet nights. But something inside her had changed. Strength had replaced helplessness. Hope had replaced despair. One evening, as the sun set outside her window, Amina sat quietly, holding a piece of fabric in her hands. She looked around the small room that had become her new world. It was not the life she once dreamed of, but it was hers. And for the first time since Hassan left, she made a decision that would shape her future. She would not wait for rescue. She would not depend on sympathy. She would rebuild her life with her own hands. step by step, stitch by stitch. With quiet determination rising inside her chest, Amina lifted her head and whispered softly to herself, though no one else was there to hear. Her life was not over. It was beginning again. And that night, Amina made the strongest decision of her life. She chose to rebuild her future on her own, no matter how difficult the journey ahead would be. The decision Amina made that night did not change her life instantly, but it changed her direction. From that day forward, she stopped seeing herself as a victim. Instead, she began seeing herself as a woman who still had choices. Every morning, she woke before sunrise, just as she had done years ago when her marriage was still alive. But now, her reason for waking early was different. She was no longer working for someone else's dreams. She was working for her own survival. Her small sewing machine became her closest companion. It sat near the window where sunlight touched the floor each morning. The soft hum of its needle moving up and down filled the quiet room. At first, her work remained simple, repairing torn clothes, adjusting loose seams, stitching buttons back onto worn shirts. The money was small but steady. And with every coin she earned, a small piece of her confidence returned. There were days when exhaustion pressed heavily on her shoulders. Her fingers would ache from long hours of sewing, and her back would hurt from sitting too long. But she refused to stop. Not anymore. Slowly, word began spreading through the neighborhood. People spoke about the woman who worked day and night without complaining. They admired her determination. Some even respected her more than before. One afternoon, an older woman named Khadija visited Amina's small room. Khadija was known in the area as a kind but strong woman who helped others find opportunities. She had heard about Amina's situation and wanted to see her work. Amina felt nervous as she showed her finished dresses. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed each piece on the table. Khadija studied the stitching carefully. She touched the fabric, checking every detail. After a long moment of silence, she nodded slowly. Her expression showed approval. That moment became one of the first sparks of hope in Amina's journey. Soon after, Khadija returned with a suggestion. There was a small local training program where women learned advanced tailoring skills. It was not expensive, but it required time and dedication. At first, Amina hesitated. She worried about the cost. She worried about failure. But deep inside, she also felt something she had not felt in years. Possibility. So she gathered her courage and joined the training. The first few days were difficult. The machines were larger. The designs were more complex. Other women in the program had more experience. Amina felt out of place. But she remembered the pain she had survived. Compared to that pain, learning new skills felt like a challenge she could face. Day by day, her confidence grew. She learned how to create new styles, measure fabric precisely, and design dresses that looked elegant and professional. For the first time in years, she began seeing her work as more than survival. She began seeing it as a future. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Hassan lived a very different life. His world had transformed completely. The small, simple house he once shared with Amina was now replaced with luxury. Large rooms, expensive furniture, and shining floors surrounded him. Nadia provided everything he once dreamed of. Fine meals, stylish clothes, comfort without struggle. At first, Hassan felt proud of his new life. He walked with confidence, speaking boldly among wealthy people. He believed he had finally escaped the life of poverty. But with luxury came change, not only in his surroundings but inside his heart. Slowly, arrogance began growing within him. He stopped thinking about the past, stopped remembering the sacrifices Amina once made. Instead, he focused only on appearances, on status, on proving himself worthy of the world he had entered. Back in her small workspace, Amina continued her training. Months passed and her skills improved quickly. Her designs became more detailed. Her stitching became cleaner. Her confidence became stronger. One evening, her instructor asked her to create a full dress design on her own. It was her first real test. The fabric lay before her like a blank page. Her hands moved carefully, guided by patience and determination. Every stitch carried meaning. Every fold carried hope. Hours passed as she worked silently. When the dress was finally complete, she stepped back and stared at it. For a moment, she did not believe her own eyes. The dress looked beautiful, professional, elegant. It was something she had created with her own hands. And in that moment, something powerful awakened inside her. Pride. Not the dangerous pride that leads to arrogance, but the healthy pride that grows from hard work. Soon, people began noticing her talent. Women from nearby areas started bringing special orders: wedding dresses, celebration outfits, and custom designs. Her income increased slowly but steadily. For the first time since Hassan left, Amina felt financial stability returning to her life. But more importantly, peace began settling into her heart. The pain of betrayal did not disappear completely. Some nights, memories still returned. But those memories no longer controlled her emotions. They became reminders of how far she had come. Meanwhile, Hassan's life continued to grow louder with luxury. He attended expensive gatherings surrounded by powerful people. He laughed easily, spoke confidently, and enjoyed the attention that came with wealth. But with every step he took into luxury, he drifted further from humility, further from gratitude, further from the man he once was. And one day, as Amina completed another dress order, something unexpected happened. A large customer placed a bulk order, more than she had ever received before. It was her biggest opportunity yet. Her hands trembled slightly as she counted the payment. It was more money than she had held in years. Her heart pounded with disbelief. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness but from relief, from pride, from victory. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Amina sat quietly near her window, holding the payment in her hands. She looked around her small but clean workspace. It was still modest, still simple. But now it carried something new. Achievement. Proof that she could rebuild her life without depending on anyone, without waiting for rescue, without surrendering to despair. And as night settled over the quiet town, Amina realized something powerful. She was no longer the broken woman left behind. She was becoming someone stronger, someone independent, someone capable of building her own destiny. And far away, without realizing it, Hassan continued walking deeper into a world of luxury, unaware that his pride would soon lead him toward consequences he could never escape. That night, Amina reached her first true milestone. She had not just survived, she had begun to rise. At first, Hassan believed he had finally won in life. Every morning, he woke up in a large bedroom with soft carpets and tall windows that overlooked the busy city below. The sunlight that entered the room reflected off polished furniture and shining floors. It was the kind of life he had once only dreamed about. Expensive clothes filled his wardrobe. Fine meals appeared on the table without effort. Cars waited outside, ready to take him anywhere he wanted. To Hassan it felt like success, like victory, like proof that leaving his old life behind had been the right choice. But slowly, without warning, cracks began to form beneath the surface. At first they were small, easy to ignore. Nadia, who had once treated him with admiration and praise, began showing a different side of herself. She still dressed elegantly and spoke confidently, but her tone changed. It became sharper, colder, more demanding. She began controlling small details in his life, what he wore, where he went, how he spoke to others. At first, Hassan accepted it without complaint. He believed it was the price of success. But with time, her control grew stronger. She questioned his decisions at work. She corrected him in front of others. Sometimes she dismissed his ideas without listening fully. The respect he once felt from her began fading. And slowly, the confidence he had built started weakening. Hassan noticed something else changing too. The people who once welcomed him warmly now treated him differently. Their smiles felt forced. Their greetings felt distant. Some avoided him completely. He did not understand why at first. But rumors had begun spreading quietly through business circles. People whispered about how he left his wife to chase wealth. Some admired his ambition. But many judged his character. Trust, once broken, rarely returns easily. Meanwhile, Nadia's expectations continued rising. She expected perfection in everything. No mistakes. No delays. No weakness. When Hassan struggled to meet her demands, her patience disappeared quickly. Arguments began replacing friendly conversations. Sharp words replaced praise. One evening, during a formal dinner with business partners, Hassan made a small mistake while presenting information. It was not serious. But to Nadia it was unacceptable. In front of everyone she corrected him sharply, her voice cold and unforgiving. The room fell silent. Embarrassment burned inside Hassan's chest. He forced a weak smile, pretending everything was fine. But deep inside, humiliation spread like fire. Later that night, the argument continued at home. Nadia blamed him for the mistake. She accused him of becoming careless. Her words struck harder than any insult. For the first time, Hassan realized that luxury did not always bring respect. Sometimes it brought pressure. Sometimes it brought fear. Days turned into weeks. The tension between them grew stronger. At work, financial troubles began appearing in their business projects. Deals that once looked promising started falling apart. Clients withdrew their support. Investments failed. Losses increased. Each failure increased Nadia's anger. Each problem increased her control. Hassan began feeling trapped inside a world he once admired. His decisions no longer carried weight. His independence slowly disappeared. The more he depended on Nadia's wealth, the weaker his own position became. Without her support, he realized he had little left. No savings of his own. No strong reputation. No true allies. And worst of all, no peace. Meanwhile, whispers about their failing projects spread through the business community. People who once respected Nadia now questioned her judgment. Her reputation began shaking. And because Hassan stood beside her, his name became tied to her failures. Soon, invitations to business gatherings stopped coming. Phone calls went unanswered. Opportunities disappeared. The world that once welcomed them began closing its doors. One evening, Hassan returned home to find Nadia sitting silently in the living room. Her face looked tense. Her eyes carried anger mixed with frustration. She informed him that another major deal had collapsed. The losses were heavy. Very heavy. That night, the argument between them became worse than any before. Nadia blamed Hassan for poor planning. Hassan tried defending himself, but his voice lacked confidence. Deep inside, fear had already taken control. Days later, reality struck harder. Legal notices arrived. Financial debts demanded payment. The wealth that once surrounded them began disappearing piece by piece. Luxury cars were sold. Expensive furniture vanished. Servants were dismissed. The grand life Hassan once admired began crumbling in front of his eyes. And with every loss, Nadia's attitude changed further. Her patience disappeared completely. Her kindness faded. What remained was cold calculation. One morning, Hassan woke to find silence in the house. No servants. No breakfast prepared. No sound of movement. Confused, he walked into the living room. Nadia stood near the door with packed bags beside her. Her expression showed no sadness. Only decision. She informed him calmly that she was leaving. She explained that their partnership had failed. That continuing together would only create more problems. Her voice carried no emotion. No regret. No attachment. In that moment, Hassan realized the truth he had ignored for so long. To Nadia, he had never been a partner. He had been useful. And now he was no longer needed. Within minutes, she walked out of the house, leaving him behind in silence. The sound of the closing door echoed loudly through the empty rooms. Hassan stood frozen, unable to move. The same loneliness he once forced upon Amina now surrounded him completely. Days passed slowly after that. Without Nadia's wealth, his life changed rapidly. Debts swallowed what little remained. Friends disappeared. Business contacts vanished. Respect faded. The man who once walked proudly among wealthy people now struggled to pay for daily meals. Shame followed him everywhere. He avoided familiar streets. Avoided eye contact. Avoided memories. But memories refused to leave him alone. Late at night, as he sat in silence, images from the past returned again and again. Amina's gentle smile. Her quiet sacrifices. Her loyal support during his hardest years. He remembered the way she waited patiently every evening. The way she believed in him even when he doubted himself. And suddenly, a painful truth became clear. He had abandoned the one person who truly cared for him. And now, everything he chased had disappeared. Wealth, luxury, status, all gone. That night, sitting alone in a nearly empty room, Hassan lowered his head into his hands. For the first time in years, tears filled his eyes. Not from anger. Not from frustration. But from regret. Deep, burning regret. The pride that once filled his heart had been replaced by loss. And as silence wrapped around him once again, Hassan realized something he had never understood before. Karma had begun its work. And everything he once valued had slipped through his fingers. That was the moment when Hassan lost not only his wealth, but his pride, his comfort, and the illusion that betrayal had no consequences. Life became painfully quiet after Nadia left. The large house that once felt full of activity now echoed with emptiness. Every sound felt louder than before, the ticking of a clock, the creak of a door, even the slow movement of air through broken windows. Hassan sat alone most days, staring at walls that once held luxury and pride. Now they held silence. Without Nadia's wealth, everything began disappearing faster than he expected. Bills piled up. Debts grew heavier. Furniture was sold piece by piece to cover small payments. The expensive clothes that once made him feel powerful were replaced by simple shirts that looked too familiar, reminders of the life he once tried to escape. Soon the large house was gone. He moved into a small rented room at the edge of the city. The walls were cracked and the window barely opened. The space felt strangely similar to the small room Amina once lived in. But at the time, he had never cared enough to imagine her suffering. Now he lived it. Days felt long. Nights felt longer. Loneliness became his constant companion. There were moments when he tried to distract himself by searching for work. He visited offices, filled out forms, and waited in long lines. But many doors remained closed. Some people remembered his past. Some remembered the rumors. And others simply saw a man who had fallen from success. Rejection followed him everywhere. Each rejection cut deeper than the last. At night, when darkness filled his small room, memories returned like unwanted guests. At first he tried pushing them away. But memories have a way of forcing themselves into silence. He remembered the early days of his marriage. The laughter. The shared dreams. The nights when Amina stayed awake sewing clothes to help pay their bills. He remembered how she sold her gold bracelet without hesitation, just to support him during hard times. Back then he had called her his strength, his partner, his blessing, and yet he had thrown it all away. One night, while sitting alone on his bed, Hassan noticed a small stain on the wall near the window. Without warning, a memory flashed through his mind. It was a memory of Amina sitting near their old window, carefully stitching clothes late into the night. Her tired eyes, her quiet determination, her soft smile when he returned home. That memory struck his heart like lightning. For the first time he allowed himself to truly feel the weight of his actions. Shame spread through his chest. Heavy, painful, unavoidable. He remembered the night he packed his bags. The way Amina stood silently near the doorway. The tears she tried to hide. The questions she never received answers to. In that moment, regret began growing inside him like a storm. Not small regret. Not passing regret. Deep regret. The kind that refuses to leave. Days later, he sat outside a small tea stall watching people pass by. Families walked together. Couples laughed. Children played nearby. Life continued moving forward for everyone else. But for him, time felt stuck. That afternoon, he overheard two men talking nearby. They spoke about a woman in the city who had become successful through her tailoring business. They admired her strength. They spoke about her kindness. They mentioned how she helped other women find work. Hassan listened quietly. At first he paid little attention. But then he heard a familiar name. Amina. His heart skipped. For a moment he believed he had imagined it. But the men continued speaking. They described her as strong, respected, and hardworking. They spoke about her success with pride. Hassan felt frozen in place. Shock filled his chest. The woman he once left behind had not been destroyed. She had risen. She had survived. More than that, she had built something powerful from her pain. For a long time he sat there without moving. His thoughts raced wildly. Memories mixed with regret. Guilt mixed with disbelief. He realized something he had never imagined. Amina did not need him anymore. The woman he once considered weak had become stronger than he ever expected. That realization hurt more than any financial loss. It forced him to face the truth. He had not only lost wealth. He had lost the only person who truly cared for him. That evening, as he returned to his small room, he sat quietly in the darkness. No lights. No noise. Only silence and memory. For hours he stared at the floor thinking about the past. Thinking about choices. Thinking about consequences. His chest felt heavy as if guilt had taken physical form inside him. Finally, after days of hesitation, he made a decision. A decision he had avoided for too long. He would find Amina. Not to demand anything. Not to reclaim the past. But to face the truth. To face the woman he betrayed. The next morning he woke early, his heart pounding with nervous energy. He asked around carefully, gathering information about her business. Each step felt heavier than the last. Fear followed him closely. Fear of rejection. Fear of shame. Fear of seeing the strength he once tried to destroy. But he continued walking. Street after street. Corner after corner. Until finally, he arrived at a place filled with movement. A tailoring shop. Clean. Busy. Alive with activity. Women moved in and out, carrying fabrics and finished designs. Voices filled the air with energy. And standing near the entrance, giving instructions with calm confidence, was Amina. Hassan stopped walking. His breath caught in his throat. For a moment he could not believe what he was seeing. The woman before him was not the broken wife he had abandoned years ago. She stood tall, confident, respected, stronger than he had ever imagined. In that moment, reality struck him harder than any punishment. He had not only lost his past, he had lost his future with her. And as he stood there, frozen in shock, one painful truth settled deeply into his heart. Amina had transformed into someone he no longer recognized, and someone he might never deserve again. Hassan stood frozen outside the tailoring shop, unable to take another step. His heart pounded heavily against his chest as he watched Amina from a distance. She moved with calm confidence, speaking to workers, checking fabrics, and guiding customers with quiet authority. There was strength in her posture, strength he had never noticed before, or perhaps never valued enough to see. The once timid woman he remembered had transformed into someone powerful, independent, respected. For several long minutes, Hassan remained where he was, hiding in the shadows near the entrance. Doubt filled his mind. Should he leave? Should he turn back before she noticed him? Fear wrapped tightly around his thoughts. But another feeling pushed him forward. Regret. Heavy, painful regret that refused to stay buried. Slowly he stepped closer. Each movement felt harder than the last. His legs felt weak as if guilt itself weighed him down. Then suddenly Amina turned. Her eyes moved across the entrance and stopped. She saw him. For a brief moment, everything around them seemed to freeze. The noise of sewing machines, the movement of workers, the voices of customers, all faded into silence inside Hassan's mind. Amina's expression changed. Not shock, not anger, not sadness. Something far stronger. Calm. Controlled calm. She did not rush toward him. She did not step back. She simply stood still, watching him with steady eyes. That calmness frightened Hassan more than anger ever could. Slowly he stepped fully into the doorway. The distance between them shrank. But the emotional distance between them felt larger than ever. Amina gave a few quiet instructions to the women working beside her. They nodded and moved into another room, leaving the two of them alone near the entrance. Silence settled heavily between them. Hassan struggled to speak. Words felt trapped inside his throat. For years he had imagined this moment. But now that it had arrived, he felt smaller than ever. His eyes lowered to the ground. Shame filled every corner of his heart. Finally he forced himself to look up. Amina remained still, her posture straight, her face calm. There were no tears in her eyes. No trembling hands. No visible weakness. That realization made his guilt grow deeper. The woman he once left crying in silence now stood stronger than him. After several long seconds, Hassan spoke. His voice was low, unsteady, filled with hesitation. He admitted that he had come because he wanted to see her, because he needed to speak, because he carried words that had waited too many years to be spoken. Amina listened quietly. She did not interrupt. She did not react immediately. Her silence forced him to continue. Slowly, painfully, Hassan began expressing the regret he had hidden for so long. He admitted that leaving her had been the worst decision of his life. He admitted that chasing wealth had blinded him, that pride had made him selfish, that greed had destroyed everything he once valued. Every sentence felt like a confession. Every memory felt like punishment. He spoke about Nadia, about the luxury, about the downfall, about the emptiness that followed. He described losing everything, the wealth, the respect, the comfort, and finally, himself. While he spoke, Amina's expression remained steady. But inside her heart, memories stirred. Old wounds reopened. Not with pain, but with awareness. She remembered the night he left, the silence that followed, the long days of loneliness, the endless nights of quiet struggle. But she also remembered something else. Her growth, her strength, her transformation. When Hassan finished speaking, silence returned once again. He waited, unsure of what would come next, unsure of what he deserved to hear. Amina finally spoke. Her voice was calm, firm, controlled. She reminded him of the past, not with anger but with clarity. She spoke about the nights she spent alone, about the humiliation she faced when people learned he had left her, about the struggle of starting again from nothing. Her words were not cruel, but they were powerful. Each sentence carried truth, heavy, undeniable truth. Hassan listened without interruption. Each word felt like a mirror reflecting his mistakes. Then Amina spoke about something unexpected. Forgiveness. Not immediate forgiveness. Not simple forgiveness. But the idea of moving forward without hatred. She explained that holding anger had once filled her with pain. But learning to release bitterness had given her peace. Her success had not come from revenge. It had come from resilience. From patience. From self-belief. Hassan felt tears burning behind his eyes. Her strength humbled him. Her calmness shattered what remained of his pride. Finally he asked the question he feared most. Could she forgive him? The question hung heavily in the air. Amina did not answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer, not with affection but with quiet authority. Her eyes met his directly. Strong. Unwavering. She explained that forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It did not erase the past. It did not restore what had been broken. Trust, once shattered, could not be rebuilt overnight. Some wounds healed, but scars remained forever. Hassan lowered his gaze. He understood. For the first time he truly understood. Amina then spoke words that carried deep meaning. She told him that life had already given him his punishment. Not through revenge. Not through anger. But through consequences. The loss of wealth. The loss of comfort. The loss of dignity. All were part of the price he paid for betrayal. Yet she also made something clear. She had moved forward. She had rebuilt her life. And she would never return to the past that once destroyed her. Her future did not belong to him anymore. Those words struck Hassan like thunder. Not cruel, but final, clear, unavoidable. Tears slowly rolled down his face. Not loud tears. Not dramatic ones. Quiet tears of realization. Quiet tears of acceptance. As silence settled between them once again, Hassan realized the truth he had spent years avoiding. Some mistakes can be forgiven, but the life they destroyed can never be rebuilt the same way again. The air between them felt different now. Not heavy with anger, not sharp with conflict, but quiet like a storm that had finally passed. Hassan stood still in front of Amina, his shoulders lowered, his pride completely gone. The man who once walked away thinking he had chosen a better life now looked like someone who had lost everything he once misunderstood. Amina watched him calmly. There was no hatred in her eyes. No revenge. No desire to hurt him back. But there was distance, clear, firm, and unshakable. Hassan slowly stepped back as if he finally understood that he no longer belonged in her space. His voice came out low, broken. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for comfort. He only asked for forgiveness, quietly like someone who had finally accepted defeat. Amina took a slow breath. For a moment she looked away, not because she was weak but because she was remembering everything she had survived. The nights she cried alone. The days she struggled to survive. The moments she questioned her worth. And then, the strength she built from all of it. When she looked back at Hassan, her voice was calm and steady. She told him something simple but powerful. She forgave him in her heart. But she would not return to him. Those words did not come with anger. They came with peace. A peace that only comes after deep healing. Hassan closed his eyes for a moment. He had expected pain. He had expected rejection. But hearing it in such a calm voice made it even more real. No hatred. No yelling. Just finality. Amina continued. She reminded him that life had already moved forward. She was no longer the woman he had left behind. She had built a new life, not because of him but in spite of him. Her success, her strength, and her peace did not belong to the past anymore. They belonged to her future. Hassan nodded slowly. For the first time he did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply listened. Because now he understood. Everything she said was true. He had chosen ambition over love. And ambition had taken everything from him. Amina stepped slightly back toward her shop. Her workers continued their tasks inside, unaware of the emotional weight that had just passed through the doorway. Before turning away completely, she gave him one final look. Not cold. Not warm. Just human. And in that look there was closure. Hassan lowered his head. He finally accepted what he had been avoiding for years. Some choices cannot be undone. Some doors, once closed, never open again. Amina turned and walked back into her shop. Not rushing. Not looking back. Her footsteps were steady, confident, and peaceful. Hassan remained standing outside for a few moments longer. He watched her through the entrance as she returned to her work, speaking kindly to her staff, guiding them with calm authority. She belonged there. Not in his past, but in her future. And he finally understood that clearly. Slowly he turned away. Each step he took felt lighter in one way, but heavier in another. He was leaving behind the woman he had hurt, but also the life lesson he would never forget. As he walked down the street, memories followed him. But this time they did not feel like punishment. They felt like truth. The truth of what he had lost. And why he had lost it. Months later, Amina's business continued to grow. Her small tailoring shop expanded into a respected name in the community. Women from nearby towns came to her for designs, training, and inspiration. She was no longer just a survivor. She had become a leader, someone others looked up to. Her past was still there, but it no longer controlled her emotions. It had become a reminder of how strong she had become. Meanwhile, Hassan lived a quieter life. He never returned to luxury. He never regained the status he once had. But something inside him changed slowly over time. He learned humility. He learned patience. He learned that true value is not in wealth or appearance, but in character and loyalty. Final reflection. One evening, as Amina stood outside her shop watching the sunset, she felt a deep sense of peace. Life had tested her, broken her, and then rebuilt her into something stronger. She no longer asked, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, she understood something greater. Everything had shaped her into who she had become. And Hassan, somewhere far away, carried the same realization. Not in anger, but in silence. Because karma does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives through loss, through realization, through the quiet understanding of what was once taken for granted. And as the sun set over the city, Amina stood strong, no longer defined by betrayal but by resilience, dignity, and self-worth. She had survived. She had grown. And she had finally found peace. The story ended not with revenge, but with truth. Time did what anger, pain, and regret could not do. It softened the sharp edges of memory. It did not erase the past, but it placed it in its proper place, behind them. Years passed after the day Hassan last saw Amina at her shop. Life in the city continued to change, but in very different ways for both of them. Amina's small tailoring shop had now grown into a respected local business. What once started in a tiny rented room had become a proper workshop with several women working under her guidance. She was no longer just stitching clothes. She was shaping lives. Women from difficult backgrounds came to her, some abandoned, some struggling, some trying to rebuild like she once did. Amina never turned them away. She saw herself in them. And because of that, she helped them rise. Her reputation in the community became strong, not because she spoke loudly, but because she worked honestly. People trusted her, respected her, admired her. But Amina never allowed success to change her heart. She remained simple, humble, grounded. Every evening, she still sat near the same window where she once struggled in silence. But now the silence no longer carried pain. It carried peace. Sometimes she would think about her past, not with bitterness but with understanding. Hassan still existed in her memories, but no longer in her emotions. He had become part of her history, not her present. Meanwhile, Hassan lived a very different life. After years of instability, failed opportunities, and isolation, he had settled into a quiet and modest existence. He worked simple jobs just to survive. No luxury, no admiration, no attention. The world that once followed him had completely moved on. At first, he struggled with resentment. He blamed circumstances. He blamed others. He even blamed fate. But slowly, reality forced him to face something harder. Truth. He realized that nothing had happened to him. Everything had been the result of his own choices. The life he once left behind was not destroyed by luck. It was destroyed by his own decisions. And the woman he once abandoned was not replaced by someone better. She had simply been undervalued. One evening, while passing through a busy market, Hassan overheard people talking about a successful woman in the city. They spoke about her kindness, her business, her strength, her journey from hardship to success. And when he heard her name, Amina, he stopped walking. He did not turn around. He did not move closer. He simply stood there listening. For a moment he smiled faintly. Not a smile of happiness, but of acceptance. He finally understood that Amina had not only survived without him. She had thrived. That night, Hassan sat alone in his small room. There was no anger in him anymore. No desire to change the past. Only reflection. He thought about the moment he chose ambition over love. The moment he believed wealth defined success. The moment he underestimated loyalty. And for the first time he truly accepted it. He had lost Amina not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to live without him. And that was the lesson he carried for the rest of his life. Final scene. One evening, Amina stood outside her workshop as the sun began to set. Golden light spread across the sky, soft and warm. Her workers were leaving for the day, laughing quietly as they walked home. Amina remained for a moment longer, watching them go. Her heart was calm. Her life was complete, not because it was perfect but because it was hers. She had rebuilt everything from nothing. Not with revenge. Not with anger. but with patience, strength, and dignity. She looked up at the sky and took a slow breath. There was no sadness left in her eyes. Only gratitude. Gratitude for survival. Gratitude for strength she never knew she had. And gratitude for the journey that turned her pain into power. Far away, Hassan also looked at the same evening sky. But his thoughts were different. Not of regret anymore, but of understanding. He finally knew a truth that took him years to learn. Love is not something to be replaced with ambition. And loyalty is not something to be tested. It is something to be protected. Final moral. Life does not always punish immediately. Sometimes it waits. It allows people to make choices. And then, it shows them the consequences slowly. Amina's life became proof that strength can be born from pain. And Hassan's life became proof that pride can destroy everything that truly matters. In the end, both of them learned the same lesson in different ways. But only one of them turned pain into power. And that is why Amina did not just survive her story, she rose above it.